I want to talk and teach a little bit about Sukkos and Simchas Torah, because in yesterday's class we we spoke about Yom Kippur. So the story is, it's 1799. It's in Liozna or Ladi, wherever the Alter Rebbe was at the time, and it's the second night of Sukkos. The Alter Rebbe is in the sukkah with his children, his sons, and he turns to the Mittler Rebbe, Reb Dovber, who became the subsequent Chabad Lubavitch Rebbe, the second one in the lineage of Chabad. And he turns to him and he says, "With what did you daven this past Rosh Hashanah?" Now the question itself is very telling. In other words, a Yid has to ask himself a question: what did I daven with Rosh Hashanah? Well, you say, what do you mean? I davened with a Machzer. I davened either in Eish Kodesh or Chabad or here or Karlbach or here or there or 770, right? And I davened with Yidden and I tried my best, and that's the way I davened. What do you want from me? Well, the Alter Rebbe asks his son, "No, but give me some specifics. What did you really daven with? What were you really thinking about Rosh Hashanah?" And the Mittler Rebbe understood that his father's question wasn't just a general nicety to lead into a conversation and make him feel comfortable, but he really wanted to know, what did he really daven with? And he answers his father, and he says, "You know what I daven with? It says in Nishmas Kol Chai that we say every Shabbos, V'chol koma l'chom mishtachaveh, and all erect, everything that's erect before you, it prostrates itself." And there's a concept brought in Kabbalah and Chassidus that there is the highest levels of the neshama called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. Without going into the Kabbalistic explanation and details, but let's just call it a very lofty experience of God. Says the Mittler Rebbe, I meditated and reflected on this thought, that even that level of godliness is subservient to God. It prostrates itself to Hashem. The whole koma, it's erect, it's tall, it's strong. But when it comes before Hashem, it melts. This is what he said. And this is very profound, right, Davi? Can you imagine? You're not davening with thinking about what's for lunch, that you're hungry, or you need your cows and your sheep and your business needs to have success. You're davening about these lofty levels of God and how even they are subdued and subservient to Hashem. You would think that's the best answer possible for a person like the Mittler Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe heard this, he went into a dveikus. The Alter Rebbe many times would answer and talk with a sing-song coming from a dveikut. A dveikus isn't an emotional, exciting, shaking and baking experience. Dveikus is calm, cool, collective, silent, and totally one, glued, impossible to be separated because you've been absorbed by something greater than yourself. And from that ecstasy state, the Alter Rebbe says, the Mittler Rebbe says to his father, seeing that his father is elsewhere, with what did you daven with? Because he sees that the Alter Rebbe is in this state of ecstasy. He figures, now I can hear the real secrets from my father, the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe says to him in a sing-song, I davened with the Stender. What? The Mittler Rebbe Velvel was expecting the Alter Rebbe to give him some holy Kabbalistic meditation that he davened with on Rosh Hashanah. And instead of that, the Alter Rebbe tells the Mittler Rebbe, I davened with a stender, by a stender. What? Let's go now 200 years later. More than 200 years later. Well, whatever. Figure it out. 1962. 63 years later. Anyway, two Hasidim who were sent by the Rebbe as students to Eretz Yisrael to strengthen the yeshiva, Kfar Chabad, and other things, bring to 770 a stender for the Rebbe, because he needed another stender, or they thought he needed one, and they brought him a stender. And who made the stender? The students at Beit Sefer Lemelacha in Kfar Chabad, the vocational school that has a printing house and had woodwork, and they wanted to do something special for the Rebbe. So they made the Rebbe a stender, and they asked the Americans who were returning from Kfar Chabad to 770, for Yom Tov, would you bring this back to the Rebbe as a gift? He said, sure. Erev Rosh Hashanah, there's a Farbrengen, 1962. They walk up to the Rebbe and they give the Rebbe, this is a present from the people, the students at the Beit Sefer Lemlacha for you. They asked us to give it to you. The Rebbe accepts it and wishes them with a bracha. And then he starts explaining the story that I just told you, to explain what a stender is. It's a fascinating read. And in fact, you can hear, it's on tape, online. You can go at Chabad.org. It's in Yiddish. But you can hear the Rebbe actually say the words. And basically, he says that a stender is something that helps a person. You know, we get tired sometimes and we want to put our hands down on the bima or on a table. And a stender is higher. Or if you have one on your table, you know, it's very useful. I think Hillel used to have a stender in Eish Kodesh, if my memory serves me well. Anyway, so the stender functions to help a person daven, to help a person meditate, reflect. But what is a stender, the Rebbe says? A stender is a piece of wood. Wood comes from a tree. A tree comes from the ground. So the stender in its state of vegetation is incomplete. When the tree is cut and from it you do woodwork and you make a stender out of it, and the stender is used for davening and learning and helping a person be more comfortable to learn and daven, the stender, which now is no longer vegetation, it's now inanimate, it's wood, has a purpose and a function. Says the Rebbe, this is what the Alter Rebbe said to his son. My dear son, your meditation on Rosh Hashanah is wonderful, but it's not the ultimate. Because you're flying up. You're flying into the sky. And listen, the Mittler Rebbe was a great master of Hasidic teachings and meditation and Kabbalah, and it's great. However, where and what does Hashem want, especially on Rosh Hashanah, and applies to us on Yom Kippur as well? He wants the Gashmias, the material, physical stender, to be spiritualized. So rather than going upward, he wants to go downward. Bring God from on high, from the position of coma, the whole coma, from being erect from there, bring Hashem into the stender, to the Gashmias, to the inanimate, and by using it for davening and learning, you basically show the connection between the rooms you're sitting in, the chairs you're sitting on, and the items of Gashmis that we have in our life, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the way the Rebbe explained, and I'm just giving you a tip of the iceberg. There's much more, but this is the Nakuda. And I think of this as we get set for Yom Kippur, but as well as Sukkos and Simchas Torah. Sukkos. We make a sukkah or we sit in a sukkah. We take the Arba Minim, the Lulav, the Yesrug, the Harava, and the Hadassim, and Erev Sukkos, you're supposed to prepare them. It's better in the sukkah itself. Why? Because the sukkah represents his yashvut, settled, being calm, and being protected from the winds, right? And that's why, even halachically, Hillel, one needs to have a sturdy sukkah. If one builds a sukkah that's not sturdy to begin with, it's a question. And that's why I'm not a great fan of these material sukkahs, although I have eaten in them, and when necessary, I use them. I don't have a choice. But if I had my choice, I would not use those. Why? Unless it's very sturdy, because they can get blown away to the right and the left. But again, thousands and thousands of Jews use them, and they're kosher. And I'm not chas v'sholem invalidating them. I'm just bringing out the point that they need to be sturdy. So make sure if you're using one of those sukkahs to make it sturdy. So the sukkah represents protection from winds. What kind of winds? The upcoming winds, Velvel, where you want to learn Chassidus, and a patient comes, and another patient, a telephone, and it's all important, and that's a priority to save a life. But nevertheless, those are winds. Then there are winds in our life when we're davening and learning, and we get a phone call. We find out about someone who has an illness or worse. It's another wind, and the winds are constant. There's no such a thing, an end to winds before Mashiach comes. Anyone thinks that the winds will end before Mashiach comes is making a big mistake, because kachi darka shel olam. This is the style and way of the world. There's ups and downs, malot and yeridot, positive and negative, challenges. Ne'ilah is about challenges, a time, an opportunity to take a challenge and transform it for Hashem. Sukkos, we take that lulav and esrog and we shake it to the right, left, up, down, backwards, and forwards to the 6 sides to bring the godliness into each of the 6 sides of the world, to have the energy permeate the sides of the world, so that each of the sides of the world, and each position and each perspective is spiritualized with godliness. And that's why we do it in the sukkah. Again, halachically, if you don't do it in the sukkah, your lulav and esrog is still kosher, okay? Don't walk away thinking that my lulav and esrog, God forbid, is possible because I've made it in my house. I didn't do it in the sukkah. But it's much better, at least Chabad minhag, is to do it in the sukkah. Prepare it. And then we sit in the sukkah. We make a bracha. We're sitting in the sukkah. What a wonderful feeling to sit in the sukkah, the first night of Sukkos. You know what I'm talking about, right? When you sit that first night, you feel like I'm a free man. This is gewaldig. This is great. You worked so hard to build your sukkah. You're running around Erev Yom Tov, getting ready for Yom Tov. One after Rosh Hashanah, Seriously made tshuva, Erev Yom Kippur, 4 days of preparation. You would be exhausted. No, but the first night, everyone anticipates, when will I have that moment to make the Leisha Basukkah, to make Kiddush with my family, with my friends, to invite others to the Sukkah, because without them, the Torah says, you're lacking in Simcha. V'samachta, and we sing V'samachta b'chagecha, or V'samachta, whatever your niggin for V'samachta is, and we sing it in the Sukkah with the family and friends. It requires others, because if you don't have the others, it's not a full Simcha. Full Simcha is when you do for others. I told you what Reb Chaim Sholem Deitch, he verbringed right there in Bet, in Mat Bet Shemesh, once on the Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit, and I was there. And it was a whole room of Hasidim, and he tells them, hey fellas, if I wake up in the morning and I think about myself, I get depressed, I get down, because family issues, this issues, that issues. But when I start thinking about other people, I become very besimcha. To help others makes you feel elated. So v'somachto b'chagecha, if you really want to feel the simcha on the Chag, on the Yom Tov, invite others, bring others, because with others, you keep your mind off the self, which is the ego, and the focus is on others, especially others that don't pay back, right? You're not benefiting and gaining from them, and nevertheless, they're part of your family and part of your sukkah. This is all part of the same idea that the Alter Rebbe told the Mittler Rebbe, and I davened with the stende. I davened with the realization that Gashmias is ultimately where God's purpose and intent is. And this is why Torah is, in a way, the total opposite of certain other religious, non-Jewish experiences of meditations and Buddhism, lahavdil, and etc. Not that I'm a master in these things, I'm not, and I don't want to be, but asceticism, being away from Gashmias, is not where it's at. They tell the story where Hasidim came to the Rebbe Marash, Reb Shmuel, the fourth Rebbe, and they said, Rebbe, you said a maimer, mi kamocha ba'elam Hashem. And in the maimer, you spoke a lot about Einoid Milvadoi. Einoid Milvadoi. Right? Einoid Milvadoi? There's nothing besides God, Avi. If so, lay down on the table and let me give you Malchus and then tell me that it's Einoid Milvadoi. You're not going to say Einoid Milvadoi when I put you down on the table, I give you Malchus. What are you going to say? You're going to say, Bereshis bara Elokim. God created the world, and there's a real table, and there's a real Bria, and the purpose is to find the Einoid Milvadoi in the Bria. That's the Kavanah. The Kavanah is to find the Einoid Milvadoi in the Gashmias. And that's the whole purpose of the Chagim. From Rosh Hashanah, through Simchas Torah, the commonality of all, whether it be the mode of seriousness of tshuva, the Aseres Tshuva from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, or the kav of simcha, the notion of simcha from Sukkos through Simchas Torah, the message is the same, which is simcha. The message is the same. Finding in the Gashmias God. The Rebbe always quoted a commentator on the Rambam called Hagoy's Maimonides, where he says, listen to this, Velvel, Moshe, he says, the Ikar Hadin, the primary judgment of Rosh Hashanah is not for Ruchnias, it's for Gashmias. And the Rebbe was wont to repeat that always, and it was always interesting to us hearing it from him, because it's not something that you see in the Svarim, HaKadoshim, and it's not something that you really read in Halacha, and it's it's a kind of an obscure commentary on the Rambam, and the Rebbe took this and he made it into a mainstay of his view of Rosh Hashanah, and he found support in this commentator known as Hagoy's Maimonides. And thinking about it, what did the Rebbe teach us? What does he teach us? That unless you find Hamelech and Tshuva and Sukkos and Simchas Torah in the Gashmias, you didn't really celebrate. You didn't really experience. You celebrated. You did the technicalities. Tomorrow we're going to give Malchus, we're going to do Kaparas if you haven't done it yet, and we're going to eat twice as much and all that, yes. But to really have the hergish, the feeling that I experienced this year a Rosh Hashanah, a Yom Kippur, a Sukkos, a Simchas Torah, you need to see it through the Gashmis. So I would say that Tishrei although it's the month of holidays, as the Medrash says, it's meruba b'moados. It's the abundance, there's an abundance of festivals which represent ruchnius, right, spirituality. Nevertheless, everyone has to know that the ultimate expression of that is through Gashmias. And that's why we make a sukkah, and we sit in the sukkah, and we celebrate in the sukkah, and we take the Arba Minim, and we give people an opportunity to bench. And I'm sure right there in Bet Shemesh, there are Yidden who maybe don't have their own, and they're not going out because of COVID or this or that. When you hear about such a person, or you seek them out, go and bring them the Lulav Esrig and make a bracha with them. And when you're at the mall over there in Bet Shemesh, there's a nice mall, big mall, I forget what it's called, and there's probably not yet religious people there, and they didn't make a bracha every day. And then guess what? Some people don't have the women make brachas. Now, some have a shita in that, but it's, here in Borough Park, we sometimes offer the women, and they're glad to make the bracha, even though officially some of the shitas, I think Klosenberg, the Netanya Klosenberg, that their sons, I think he was against women making a bracha on the Lulav Esrig. So they're probably not going to want to do it, but many others will do it. Anyway, the Nekuda is that from there we go to Simchas Torah. But before I continue, I'd like to give you a chance to comment or ask.
Rabbi Delvin's question about the Gashmias.
Yes, Chaim
Just a
Mushka.
question. How do we, you mentioned, so the question is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, though, is the one day a year that we get as close to being Malachim as possible. No, dafka, the opposite of Gashmias. Now, it's so true what you said. Obviously, it's true. Erev Yom Kippur is one thing. It's one frame of preparation, which of course involves Gashmias. Yom Kippur itself is the complete abstinence of Gashmias in every way.
So I'll respond.
Except the gender.
And what you said is the answer to Moshe's point, and I'll explain it this way. I don't look, and I don't want to be a malach, and I don't think you want to be a malach either, Moshe. So it's true. We're saying Baruch Shem and out loud, and we're dressed in the kittel and white, but the kavanah of all that is the shtender. In other words, the angelic state of Yom Kippur is a means to an end. And anyone that wants to get stuck, God bless them. and be an angel, and be angelic, and be removed. You understand? So yes, this one day a year calls for an approach that's angelic-like, like you said, malach-like. That's true. But the kavana, the intent, is the shtender. The kavana is, it's like I rest at night, so in the morning I get up, I'm fresh. Right? Abstinence makes the heart grow fonder. The same idea, this is the same nekuda. So if you remain in a state of abstinence, you're a monk. You're not a yid. A yid procreates. A yid is involved in Gashmias. But if so, Moshe's question is a great question. Why do we celebrate Yom Kippur in this abstinent state, in this angelic state? The answer is because you need to recharge your batteries. And if you don't have the right perspective, you end up getting sunk into Gashmias. In other words, when can you experience the shtender in the best way? It's on the fan. You turn it on the AC. When can you experience the real kedusha and ultimate purpose of the shtender is when your perspective is right, and that's Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the day to change the paradigm and the perspective, and that needs fasting, meditation, reflection, crying, and all that. But it's all It's a means to an end, not an end. And it's very important. So I'm glad you asked that, because, you know, and I understand, I believe, where you're coming from with your question. You know, what we feel in the community and in the frum world, and you know, is like the angelic, the malach, you know, like you know, on Yom Kippur, and that's good, and that's important, but it's a means to an end. That's my point of what I'm saying in this year, Moshe. That's why the transition from Yom Kippur is right into Sukkos. If you can't experience God in the Sukkah, sitting outdoors and sitting with others and saying L'chaim and singing B'samachta, you didn't have a real Yom Kippur. Your Yom Kippur was selfish. So Moshe, the Malach-like state of Yom Kippur is not a selfish state. Anyone that thinks, you know, oh, I'm going to lock myself out of the world, and I'm not talking about, you know, therefore I'm going to be social on Yom Kippur. No, it's a time to daven and to say Tehillim and not to talk much. Absolutely. But the kavanah is so that I will transmit this experience in the sukkah to others. And that's why, right, from the 100 sounds of the shofar, the koil shofar would blow 100 blasts, we get the gematria of the word schach, which the word sukkah, it's shoresh is schach, samach chof chof equals 100. So what we begin, Moshe, with 100 koilos ends up being in the schach of the sukkah through the medium of Yom Kippur, where the Kohen Gadol goes, the holiest person, goes once a year. So it's the one person, once a year in the one place called the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kodeshim. And what does he bring? Ketores, incense. Wow. Some say, wow, this Judaism is a good practice. We get a chance here to become high, to practice Ketores. Have some hashish. Full. The Kohen Gadol, the holiest Yid, representing the Jewish people, on the holiest day, brings Ketores, because Ketores is a scent, a smell. Goes through the nose, you smell, touches the neshama, as explained in the Svarim. You hear that, Avi? Smelling something is so powerful that it touches the deepest part of the person, the soul. So the Kohen Gadol is looking to experience that on behalf of all Yidden. So he brings ketores, and smoke comes from the incense, the smoke. It's explained in the Kabbalah and Chassidus that smoke is also connected very much with the koil of the shofar. So the sounds of the shofar bring the smoke coming from the burning of the incense, which leads to the schach of the sukkah. It's one continuum. And what do we finish with? We finish with Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. Rebbe Rashab says those that will invest energy, schwitzing, dancing, singing, and clapping, even if you can't dance because for your heart or whatever, you stand in one place. I think I've told you this last year and I repeat it. I've seen people who stand in one place and they keep on moving their feet, and they keep on clapping, they keep on smiling, they keep on singing, fully involved, engrossed in the mitzvah of Simchas Torah. And how do we dance with a Torah? Well, you would think on a day like Simchas Torah, when we conclude the whole Torah, take out the Torah, open up the Torah, and sit and learn for a few hours, because that's what the Torah is. No, we don't do that. We take the Torah, we hug the Torah, we embrace the Torah, we dance with the Torah, we carry the Torah, we're jubilant, we're excited with a closed Torah, with a mental as a parochas around the Torah. What's the idea? Everyone's the same. If we were to open the Torah and learn, you and I learn differently. And everyone else learns differently, and some have more knowledge, less knowledge, etc. Some can't even read the Torah, understand the Torah. We would see the differences and divisions between Jews. We say we don't want that. on Simchas Torah, because that's not like the Shtender. The Shtender Hillel is for everyone. Someone who doesn't know how to read, doesn't know how to learn, doesn't even know it's Yom Tov, can use that Shtender in a shul. He can lean on the Shtender. Right? Yes.
There's a popular song that says we all need something we can lean on.
Okay. You've now transformed the song into a Davar Sheba Kedusha. The idea being that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkos, ultimately are all expressed in those dances. Says the Rebbe Rashab, will hear this, because this is worth free advice for making lots more parnasa. Free advice. Doesn't cost anything. Says the Rebbe Rashab, dancing 48 hours of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael, the 24 hours, the one day, with lots of merits, energy, to the point where you're schwitzing, is a segula for parnasa. What the kesher is, I don't really know, and I don't want to get into that right now. But that's what he said. For me, that's good enough. That's good enough to add to the portfolio. You know, we have portfolios of this investment and that investment. We also have Jewish portfolios of what can be done through the year to help us in this way and that way. And although Chabad is not into segulos, you're not into that, but if the Rebbe Rashab said it, that means he does want us to know that. But going back to the Simchas Torah, and this is something that I really want you to try to come to and experience. Just like I asked before, how do you feel that first night sitting in the sukkah and I saw some of you shake your head and have a smile on your face and say, it's like gewaldig, it feels so therapeutic, so cathartic, it's so beautiful. We have to have that same feeling in Simchas Torah when we dance with the Torah. When you hold the Torah, when you're honored to hold the Torah, you get the Torah, I want you to try to feel the love that the Torah loves you and that you love the Torah. And just get into that moment. Make sure you know where you're going so you don't end up, chas v'shalom, hurting yourself and hurting the Torah. But to really think while you're dancing with the Torah, this Torah is our life. This Torah got us through. And it got us through the hardest of time, the Spanish Inquisition, and in the Babylonian time, and this time, and the Holocaust, and now with the great fallout and all kinds of issues plaguing us. It's this Torah that gets us through and will get us through. And David HaMelech, I taught you about the David Mizmor, that special paragraph, chapter 24 in Tehillim, that we say the night of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur after Ma'ariv. And I told you the history is that when David HaMelech, when the Pelishtim, the Philistines, they saw that holding the Torah by them is bringing them problems and plagues, they said, take it away, give it away. And he went to David HaMelech, and David HaMelech says, yes, give it back to us. And he marches from your area over there, from Bet Shemesh area somewhere, the valley where the Pelishtim is, he marches up to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, and David says, David Mizmor, Hashem ha'aretz u'mloya, su'umarim einechem, and everything else, miyale bahar Hashem, who can ascend the mountain of God? Because they're walking up the mountain towards the Beis HaMikdash, Yerushalayim. Neki chapayim uvar levov, someone whose heart is pure and his heart is pure, right? Whose hands are pure and his heart is pure. So David HaMelech is telling us that the Torah needs to be in the Beis HaMikdash. What does that mean for us? This Torah that we dance with on Simchas Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, it's our life. It needs to be in the right place in our heart. So when you hug it and you hold it right next to you and it's close to your heart, that's one of the thoughts you should have. I want this Torah. I love it so much to be in my heart of hearts. This is my real love. Not Gashmias, but again, must be experienced through Gashmias, like the Stender. Right? If it's not experienced in the Gashmias, that means you really don't have the Torah. So here we have a Torah scroll covered up with its covers paroiches, and we dance with it. And this is why this is the seal of all the Chagim from Rosh Hashanah through Simchas Torah is specifically with a minute. You know, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah Kedosha that we should dance with a Torah on Simchas Torah. Right? It's a minute. A minute that started hundreds of years ago, many years ago, thousands of years ago, whatever, when it started. But it's a minute at the end of the day. And we say, that's right. Specifically in the Minhage Yisrael, in the Jewish customs, is where you experience the ultimate of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkos, which are all biblical. So if you don't have the siyums of the Chagim, Simchas Torah, the three first that are biblical are missing something. And why? It's only a minute, so I didn't do the minute. So I'm not going to dance. I'm not going to be happy. Some people come to shul and they're waiting they're waiting to get out of shul on Simchas Torah. It's a long davening, and there's, you know, the kol on the orim, and there are people drinking and people dancing, and it's a balagan. It's some people get very, very antsy. When can I finish this? You know what I used to do when I was in Crown Heights for Yom Tov? They have an early minyan. So I would daven the early minyan, 10:30 we will finish, and then I could say l'chaim and talk and fabrang and dance, you know, because I wanted to get all the chiyuvim. That's a different thing, you know, if you don't want, because if you start saying l'chaim, you might miss a kaddish and an amen, and, you know, but I'm not suggesting you do that. That's up to you, you know, every individual. But the Nekuda is, why do you want Simchas Torah to end? You shouldn't want Simchas Torah to end. And the Rebbe once told over the story of Anim's Midas, you know, the Chabad song, Anim's Midas. That Lubavitcher song, very meditative. The Rebbe said there was a Yid who, after Yom Kippur, the next morning, the Gabbai found him still circling the bima and singing this niggun. He couldn't disattach himself from the Kedusha. Could you imagine? You'll find someone who's dancing a whole time, and it goes on and on and on into the night. Everyone goes home. Everyone says, oh, we finished the Yom Tovim, and he is ecstatic and he's elsewhere. Halavai, we would have that experience once in our life. Once. Where we wouldn't know where we are because we're just love the Torah and embrace the Torah, and we're elsewhere. This is Simchas Torah. This is a Simchas Torah. So we have our work cut out for us. That's what I'm saying. That, you know, some people say, the hard work is Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You know, not eating, and blowing shofar, and fasting, right? Sukkos, eating, drinking, partying, Simchas Torah. The truth is, I don't know, but to me, it's much harder to experience real holiness and ruchnius in the Gashmias. And that's where it's at. That's why it's in the Stender. It's easy, Moshe, it's just to further develop the answer to your question. It's easier to feel Hashem as an angel on Yom Kippur. You're in shul pretty much all day. You're under a talis. You're and it's a holy, serious mode. You can easier get into to the experience of God. To have that same feeling when you're kind of eating and drinking and just partying and being, Sukkos. It's much harder. And then when you start dancing with a Torah, and you start saying l'chaim and all that, it's even harder. And we would say that's where you have to find Hashem. That's where you have to find Hashem. And therefore, if it gets to a point where a person loses themselves or a situation, that's not holy, and that needs to be, dealt with in a way that's respectful but yet contained. We've had people, I'm sure you've had people who drink a little too much, okay, but they go to the side and they do what they need to do, or they go home and they go to sleep. There needs to be maintained decorum and respect of some level in a shul, in an environment. And I don't have to tell you, but a lot of the youth take the opportunity to come into shuls to drink, to get alcohol. It's important for Gaboyim and other people to be on top of this, because people have gotten hurt, and it's a serious business. So, sometimes in the fray of kedusha and holiness and simcha, we neglect and others, abuse the simcha and the alcohol, and it gets to be very bad. So don't forget, you don't have to be a gabbai, but if you see that, take the bottle away and hide the bottle. Here in Borough Park, in our shul, and you're talking about, Lubavitch Hasidic shul here, until this year, during Hakofas itself, they didn't have the whiskey out. They had the l'chaim before, and then why? Because they knew when you start dancing and getting very intense, you start drinking at the same time, there's going to be problems. And we had some years, so they take all the mashkid away. You can't get a drink during tomorrow, the day of Simchas Torah. It's a little easier. All I'm saying is that someone put the thought of how I want to safeguard the experience so that no one gets hurt. So I just say that as an aside, but yet it's a very important thing. Any questions or comments on this? Hilla.
I just want to say that was beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful, very uplifting. I overheard in shul the other day.
Yes.
Somebody say something, and I had a thought that I couldn't share because I was involved with my tefillin, but I wanted to share it now. The person said that on Rosh Hashanah that we're punishing our averas and on Yom Kippur we're Seres Yemei Tshuva. Yom Kippur we're punishing our averas, and that at the Simchas Beis Shueva we go back and schlep them back. We bring them back as kuyos.
As what? As what?
As kuyos. As kuyos.
Right. Okay.
So somebody said to the Maggid Shira at that point, well, what about Tashlit? What does Tashlit fit into that? And he couldn't answer, but I had the thought. He says, of course we have to have Tashlit in there. My minhag is to do Tashlit Davka today, the Yud Gimel Midos HaRachim during Slichos.
Right.
But of course, if you want your averas to go through a transformation, they first have to go to the mikvah. They have to be tired of mayim, and then you can bring them back as the kuyos. So
very good. I like that word. I like it. An original. It will have a Pirush Hillel. Velvel, what do you want to say, Velvel?
I'm sorry, I just want to wish everybody Machasima Toiva and all the best, the good gebenchte Jahr, and with
you too.
With all good things. Unfortunately, I have to go to the operation room. I'm very sorry about it.
But
Velvel,
you said, I'll let you go. You said to me this morning that you have a busy month Tishrei with patients. What's the connection? I imagine
No. I didn't say. I meant that the hospital has tough months because I'm not there, so they have to manage it.
Now I understand.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's
No,
the point.
no, that's,
Anyway.
not about me. It's,
Yeah,
about
okay, I
patience
didn't,
and,
I got it. Anyway, Hashem should be matzliach you should be successful and find the time.
Thank you much.
And go and Gemar Sibatova. What?
And thank you so much for everything.
My pleasure, and we'll be back October 6th, Wednesday, Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan will be the next time for this year. Avi, Moshe, everyone have Gemar Sibatova. Zayt is
Thank you.